Hello, this is Rusty Williamson with another cool tutorial. Today we'll be using the Orb plugin, which is a free plugin from Video Copilot, to create this really cool planet. We'll also be using the free plugin from Video Copilot, Color Vibrance, so you'll need these plugins. I also use a free plugin from Video Copilot called FX Console, which is just a shortcut to the effects and presets search box. We'll build this planet and then we'll hit it with an asteroid and then we'll make it explode. Alright, let's get started. File, new project. Create a new composition. It can be 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, 16 seconds long. Alright. We'll import a map. The link for this map is in the comments below. This is a planet map I created for a sci-fi book I wrote. The planet's name is Amular. We'll drag this into the new composition. It's much larger than the composition, but don't worry about that. And then we'll duplicate the layer. We'll rename it Bump. Bump maps are black and white, so we'll add the effect black and white. And it needs more contrast, so we'll add the curves effect. In bump maps, the light areas are raised up and the dark areas are depressed. So we'll just take this and up the contrast a little bit, like so. Maybe a little less. Select the layer and duplicate the layer and rename it glossiness. Glossiness maps, the light area gives more specular highlight than the dark areas. So we want to increase the contrast until the land masses are just about black, while keeping the ocean not so black. That should do it. Okay, we'll hide all these layers and we'll create a new solid. We'll call it Orb. And we'll add the effect VC Orb. We'll up the radius until it's a little bigger. Maybe up to 286. We'll close the material properties and open the maps. The maps are the secret to the Orb plugin. We'll drop in the diffuse layer, the Amular map. Let's rotate this a little bit. Put it on full and zoom in. Now we can see we have a specular highlight here, but the specular highlight covers the ocean and the land mass equally, and it's too intense. So we'll add our glossiness map to correct that. Now as you can see, the ocean has a lot of glossiness, but the land masses have less. We zoom in, our land masses look pretty good, but watch what happens when we add the bump map. Now it looks much better. Alright, we've created our planet worthy of exploding. Now we'll add the shadow effect. change the view from wireframe and forces to rendered. Advance the time frame a little bit. We'll go into the shape properties, change it from bricks to glass. We'll up the repetitions to 200. And let's zoom in on our timeline. We'll have to create this in very fast motion because of how the shadow effect works, but we're going to slow it down. But that means we have to work close in here. Now, we forgot to rotate our planet. So let's do that real quick and put it at frame 0 and keyframe the rotation Y. And we'll take it to the end of the comp. And we'll rotate it. Now let's zoom in again on our timeline. Take a look. All right. Go to the 15 frame mark again. We'll set the radius to 0.1. Forgot to keyframe this. Keyframe the radius at 0.1. Go back one keyframe and keyframe it at 0. Now we'll take the position and move it to the upper right corner, like so. Now let's see what we've got. That's just about what we want. And about, let's see, we're at frame 15. The 1 minute mark's too far. We want the particles to be around the hole like this, but not much more. And then what we want to do is go to force 2. Keyframe the radius and set it to 0.4. We want to go to the position and place the position in the very center. Now we want to go back one frame and set the radius to 0. Now we go through it, the hole appears, and then the planet explodes. All right. And we'll take the orb layer and we'll duplicate it. And we'll go to the lower orb layer, select it, and rename it Core. And we might as well rename the orb layer Crust. And we'll come down to the core layer again, and we'll solo it. And we'll add the effect Fractal Noise. We'll change the type from basic to dynamic progressive. We'll up the contrast a little, down the brightness a little, so we have nice shades of gray. Then we'll open the transform properties and scale it down until we have sort of a grainy type of surface. Then we'll add the effect color vibrance and change it to a fiery color. Something like that. We'll go up to the VC orb plugin and we'll reduce the radius a little bit. Let me see. We'll unsolo it. Zoom in. There's a little bit of red around the edge, so we just want to bring it down until there's no more red around the edge. Like so. Now we want to go down to the shatter plugin and turn force 1 off by unclicking the stopwatch at radius and make sure the radius is at 0. Then we want to go down into the physics and up the mass variance to maybe 35 or 38. Up the rotation speed a little and the randomness a little bit. Now let's see what we've got. Alright, that explodes. We've got the red underneath it now, and that looks good. The planet explodes sooner or later. Alright, let's see what we have. Alright. One problem we have is the blue. The blue is okay at a certain point, like when the planet's first breaking up. Like say there, it's okay. But beyond that point, it should change colors. So we'll select our crust. And add the effect. CC Toner. That changes the color, but we don't want to change it there, so we'll keyframe the blend with original and change this to 100% to keep it blue there. And then we'll come out a little ways and say by here we want it to change colors, maybe a little sooner. Maybe there. So we'll keyframe this to 0. Gives us a nice brown color. We don't have to make any changes. Okay. Now what we need to do is select all these layers and pre-compose them. Come back to our Comp 1, right-click on the layer, and go to Time, Enable Time Remapping. Once again, we'll zoom in a little bit, and actually we won't zoom in a little bit. Alright. There, it's clear. Here, here. All right. Right about here is where we want it to end. So we'll set a keyframe. We'll move the last keyframe beyond, and then we'll move this keyframe to the end. Okay, let's see what we've got. Uh-oh. Looks good, but we've made one little error. Go back to our pre-comp 1, select the crust, go to the shatter effect, open the physics up, open the physics up, and change the gravity to 0. Then do the same thing for the core layer, change the gravity to 0. Go back to our comp 1, and now let's see what we've got. Turns out a little different every time I do it. All right. These particles are looking a little square and chunky to me. I'm going to go to the pre-comp here, and let's see. We'll find where the explosion happens, the big one. We'll let it kick in there, and let's see. We'll create a new adjustment layer. We'll add the effect Turbulent Displace. We'll slide the layer out to where our timeline is, right where the explosion is. And we'll set the amount to 88, and we'll set the size to 16. All right. Now let's see what we've got. That looks a little better. Now we need to whip up an explosion for the background. We'll create a new composition. We'll call it EXP for explosion. 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, same length of time. We'll add a solid, and we'll call this parts. And we'll add the effect CC Particle World. Okay, we will go down to the physics and change the gravity to 0. We'll also advance it so we can see what we're doing. We'll go up to the longevity and reduce it until the particles are just within the borders of the screen. Close the physics, open the particles, change the particle type from line to faded sphere, up the birth rate until it's solid in the middle, up the death rate until it's solid all around, Size variation, reduce it from 50 to 25. Alright, let's see. So I've got the death rate at about 4.6, and that's the death size rather, and the birth size at approximately 1.6. Let's see what we've got. Okay, that's about what we want. Now we'll create a new solid. We'll call it Solid Noise. We'll add the effect Fractal Noise. We'll change the fractal type from basic to dynamic progressive. We'll up the contrast a bit, say to 160, and we'll down the brightness a little, just so we have some nice grays in there. We'll open the transform properties, and whoops, we didn't name this layer somehow. Noise. We'll drag the noise layer below the parts layer, and we'll bring the particles up to their largest, so when they first get largest. And then we'll take the scale and up the scale a bit, say about 152. Then we'll keyframe the scale. Bring the cursor back to frame 0 and lower the scale to about 30. Press U so we can see our keyframes. Let's bring it out to about there, about 5 seconds, just roughly. And let's expand it some more. Then let's alt-click on the evolution and enter time times 850. And we'll change the track matte back to alpha matte parts and see what we have. Alright, that looks pretty good. We'll select our parts layer, and then we'll add an adjustment layer, and we'll add the effect Time Warp. Alright, we'll lower it to, say, 20. Now let's see what we've got. Good. Now we'll add another adjustment layer. And we'll add the effect Color Vibrance. And we'll change it to a nice fiery color. Something like that. Alright, we'll come back to our Comp 1. We'll go to our Project panel, and we'll drag our explosion down to the bottom. I'll come back to here, and go forward until the planet hits the big explosion. About right there. We'll move our explosion layer over to right there. That fills it in nicely. I want to fade it out about right here. So we'll hit T for transparency, keyframe the opacity, move it over a bit, about 12 seconds, 13 seconds, and set it to 0. Then we'll select both keyframes and hit F9. Now let's see what we've got. Now I want to fade the embers out. Well, they're not embers yet, but they will be. About right here. Where we set the keyframe for the explosion to fade out. Now we'll go to about the midway point right here. And we'll hit, we'll add the effect. Fast box blur. And we'll keyframe the radius at 0. And we'll move it to the end. And we'll up the blurriness until they actually vanish. Now we'll move the time marker to right there where we have the opacity fade out there. And we'll hit T for transparency and keyframe the opacity. And we'll move it to about 15 seconds and we'll change it to 0. Now let's see what we have. Looks pretty good. Alright, we're almost done. All we have to do now is add a solid, call it BG for background, make it a black solid, drag it down to the bottom, then add another solid, call this stars, make this a white solid, add the effect, CC starburst, change the speed to 0, and lower the size to about 30. And there we go. We got our starry background, we have our detailed planet, and we have our explosion. First the asteroid impacts, and then the planet explodes. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you learned anything, give it a like. If you have any questions, post them in the comments below. Until next time.